and I was serving in the Imperial Japanese Army, stationed on Guadalcanal in the Solomon Islands. We had been told we were fighting the Americans. We had been told we were defending a strategic area for the Emperor. What we hadn't been told was that there was something else living in the jungle, something that had been there long before the war, long before any of us set foot on that cursed island. Something that saw us as nothing more than meat. I'm writing this now because the nightmares never stopped. Because every time I close my eyes, I'm back there, back in that green hell where the trees never end and the screaming, God, the screaming never stops echoing in my head. The brass called it combat fatigue, battle psychosis. They said the jungle played tricks on tired minds. They said we were hallucinating from malaria, from exhaustion, from fear. But I know what I saw. We all did. The ones who made it out alive, at least. We'd arrived on Guadalcanal in May of 1942, part of the occupation force tasked with building airstrips and establishing defensive positions. The island was supposed to be easy. Strategic, yes, but undefended. The locals were peaceful. There were no enemy forces. It should have been a simple construction assignment. We built our airbase at Lunga Point, fortified the beaches, prepared for an enemy that we thought would never come. The heat was unbearable from day one. This wasn't like Manchuria or even the jungles of Southeast Asia. This was something different. The humidity pressed down on you like a wet blanket, suffocating, relentless. Your uniform never dried. Your boots rotted from the inside. Insects swarmed everywhere, biting, crawling, disease-carrying. But we were soldiers. We endured. The local islanders kept their distance. They watched us from the edges of the jungle, these dark-skinned people who'd lived here for generations. Some of our men tried to communicate with them, tried to establish some kind of relationship. The islanders were polite enough, but there was something in their eyes. Fear, maybe, or warning. They never came near the jungle interior. They kept their villages on the beaches, away from the dense forest that covered the island's mountainous center. One of our interpreters, a man who'd studied some of the local dialects, told us about their legends. Stories about giants who lived in the caves and the deep jungle. Man-eating creatures that stood twice the height of a normal man. We laughed it off. Superstition. Folklore designed to keep children from wandering too far from home. Every culture has such stories. We didn't believe a word of it. Then the Americans came. August 7th, 1942. We woke to the sound of naval bombardment and the sight of American ships filling the horizon. They hit us fast and hard. Marines swarmed the beaches in numbers we hadn't anticipated. We fell back from our coastal positions, retreating inland according to orders. The plan was to regroup, to conduct guerrilla operations, to make them pay for every meter of ground they took. Our unit was assigned to the interior. Deep jungle patrols, harassment of enemy supply lines, intelligence gathering. 12 men under the command of a sergeant who'd seen combat in China. Hard man, that one. Never showed fear, never hesitated. The kind of leader you'd follow into hell itself. We had a lieutenant fresh from the academy, eager to prove himself. The rest of us were regular infantry, soldiers who'd learned our trade in previous campaigns. We moved deeper into the island, away from the American advance. The jungle swallowed us whole. Within hours of leaving our last outpost, we were in territory that no Japanese soldier had explored. Hell, territory that probably no one had explored in generations. The canopy above us was so thick that sunlight barely penetrated. Everything existed in a green twilight that played tricks on your eyes. The first week was routine. We established camps, scouted American positions when we could, reported back via radio. The Americans were consolidating their hold on the airfield, bringing in supplies, fortifying their positions. Standard invasion protocol, nothing we hadn't seen before. But something was wrong. We all felt it, though no one wanted to say it out loud. That sensation of being watched. Not by the Americans, not by the locals, by something else. Something that moved through the jungle without sound, that observed us from the shadows. that tracked our movements with an intelligence that made your skin crawl. We started finding things. Tracks in the mud that didn't make sense. Footprints, humanoid in shape, but massive. 3, sometimes 4 feet long, pressed deep into the ground like whatever made them weighed as much as 3 men. The lieutenant suggested they were fake, something the Americans had left to spook us. But we were miles from any American position, and the tracks were old, some of them weathered by weeks of rain. Then we found the first body. He was one of ours, a scout from another unit that had been operating in this sector. We identified him by his uniform, by his equipment. His rifle was still clutched in his hands, 3 rounds fired. But the body itself, God, I don't want to remember what had been done to him. He'd been torn apart, not by bullets, not by shrapnel, by something with incredible strength. Limbs ripped from sockets, ribcage crushed, and bite marks. Deep, horrible bite marks that showed teeth far larger than any human's. "Animal attack," the sergeant said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Tiger, maybe, or a large crocodile." "There are no tigers on Guadalcanal," the lieutenant said quietly. "And crocodiles don't climb trees." He pointed up. There was blood on the branches above us. A lot of blood. Whatever had killed this man had done it 15 feet off the ground. We buried him and moved on. What else could we do? We had orders. We had a mission. One death, however horrible, couldn't stop us. This was war. Men died in war, sometimes in ways that didn't make sense. The second body was found 3 days later. Another scout, from our own unit this time. He'd been on night watch, posted on the perimeter of our camp. We found him at dawn, dragged 200 meters into the jungle. The screaming had woken us, short and abruptly cut off. By the time we reached him, he was already dead. Whatever had taken him had been fast, impossibly fast. The body showed the same damage. Massive trauma. Bite marks. But this time there was something else. Scratches on a nearby tree trunk. Deep gouges in the bark, running vertically down the trunk from a height of maybe 12 feet. 4 parallel lines, like claw marks. But no claws I'd ever seen could dig that deep into hardwood. "We need to abort," one of the younger soldiers said. His voice was shaking. "We need to get back to base. Report this." "Report what?" the sergeant snapped. "That we're scared of the jungle? That we're running from shadows? We have orders. We stay." But I could see it in his eyes. He was scared too. We all were. That night, we doubled the watch. 4 men on guard at all times, backs to the fire, facing outward into the darkness. The jungle was alive with sound. Bird calls, insect noise, the rustling of small animals in the undergrowth. Normal sounds, sounds we'd heard every night for weeks. Then, around midnight, everything went quiet. Complete, absolute silence. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just dead air and the sound of our own breathing. In the jungle, silence means predator. It means danger. It means something apex is nearby, something that makes every other living thing hide. "Weapons ready," the sergeant whispered. "Watch the tree line." We waited. Minutes stretched out like hours. Sweat ran down my face despite the cool night air. My hands were steady on my rifle, but my heart was hammering in my chest. Training told me to stay calm, to breathe, to watch my sector. Instinct told me to run. The smell hit us first. It rolled out of the jungle like a physical wave, making us gag and choke. Rot and decay and wet animal fur. The stench of a predator's den, of old kills left to molder in the heat. It was overwhelming, so strong it made your eyes water. Then came the sound, a low rumbling that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Not quite a growl, not quite a roar. Something between animal and something else. It vibrated in your chest, made your teeth ache, triggered every primitive fear response the human brain possesses. "What the hell is that?" someone whispered. The bushes moved, not from wind, from something pushing through them, something big. We could hear branches breaking, vegetation being crushed under weight. The sound was coming closer, circling our camp, moving through the jungle with purpose. "There!" one of the guards screamed, pointing. I turned. In the darkness beyond our firelight, something moved. A shape, massive and pale, moving between the trees. For just a second, it stepped into a shaft of moonlight, and I saw it clearly. It was humanoid, walking upright on two legs, but it was huge, easily 10 or 12 feet tall. The body was muscular, covered in matted hair that might have been brown or red in better light. The arms were too long, reaching past where knees would be on a normal man. But it was the face that made my blood run cold. Sunken eyes that caught the light and reflected it back, glowing dull red. A mouth full of jagged teeth. And in one massive hand, it carried a club, not a modern weapon. A primitive stone club, the kind ancient peoples might have used, but sized for something 3 times larger than a man. It looked at us. I swear to God, it looked right at us, studied us with an intelligence that should not have existed in something like that. Then it opened its mouth and made that sound again, that horrible rumbling roar, and it charged. "Fire! Fire!" the sergeant screamed. We opened up with everything we had, rifles cracking, muzzle flashes lighting up the jungle. I saw my bullets hit. I saw the impacts on that massive torso. But it didn't slow down. It just kept coming, moving with speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. It crashed into our camp like an avalanche. The club came down, and one of my comrades simply ceased to exist. One moment he was there. The next he was just gone. Crushed into the ground with force I couldn't comprehend. Men were screaming, firing, trying to run. The creature grabbed another soldier, lifted him up like he weighed nothing. The soldier's screams lasted maybe 3 seconds before that horrible mouth closed around his head. "Fall back! Into the jungle!" the sergeant roared. We ran, pure panic, all training abandoned. We crashed through the undergrowth, branches whipping our faces, vines trying to trip us. Behind us, I could hear the sounds of killing, the wet crunch of bones breaking, the screams cutting off abruptly. We ran for maybe 10 minutes before the sergeant called a halt. We counted heads, 8 men. We'd started with 12, 4 dead in less than 5 minutes. What was that thing?" the lieutenant gasped, his face pale in the darkness. "I don't know," the sergeant said. His hands were shaking. I'd never seen him scared before. "I don't know, but we need to get off this island. We need to warn command." Behind us, in the distance, I heard it again, that roar, long and echoing through the jungle. And I knew with absolute certainty that it was hunting us. That whatever that thing was, it wasn't done feeding. The hunt had only just begun. We moved through the jungle like ghosts, every sound making us flinch, every shadow a potential threat. The sergeant had us traveling in complete silence, using hand signals only. No talking, no unnecessary noise. Whatever had attacked our camp was still out there, and sound would draw it to us like blood draws sharks. Dawn came slowly, the darkness giving way to that perpetual green twilight that filtered through the canopy. We'd been moving for hours, putting distance between ourselves and the massacre site. My legs burned with exhaustion. My lungs felt like they were on fire. But we didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Stopping meant death. The lieutenant tried the radio again. Static. We were too deep in the jungle, too far from any relay station. Or maybe the equipment was damaged from our panicked flight through the undergrowth. Either way, we had no communication. No way to call for help. No way to warn anyone about what we'd encountered. "We need to reach the coast," the sergeant said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Get back to our lines. Report what happened." "Who's going to believe us?" one of the soldiers asked. "We tell them a giant monster attacked us. They'll think we've lost our minds." "We have no choice," the sergeant replied. We need reinforcements, heavy weapons, artillery support. We can't fight that thing with rifles." He was right, of course. But the coast was at least 30 kilometers away, through hostile jungle, through territory that thing considered its hunting ground. And we'd have to avoid American patrols, too. The enemy would shoot us on sight, ask questions later. We were trapped between two forces, both of them deadly. We found a small cave around mid-morning, a hollow in a rocky outcropping that offered some shelter. The sergeant called a halt. We needed rest, needed to tend wounds, needed to think. We posted guards at the entrance and collapsed inside, too exhausted even to speak. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that thing. That horrible face, those teeth, the casual way it had killed my comrades, like they were nothing, like we were insects to be swatted aside. I'd seen death before. I'd killed men in combat. But this was different. This was predation. Pure and simple. The locals knew, one of the younger soldiers said quietly. They tried to warn us. He was right. The islanders had kept their distance from the interior jungle. They'd told stories about giants, about creatures that hunted men. We'd dismissed it as superstition. We'd been fools. "How many of them are there?" someone asked. "Just one? Or more?" No one had an answer. We'd only seen one creature, but that didn't mean it was alone. The thought of multiple giants, an entire population of them living in these mountains, was almost too terrifying to contemplate. The sergeant was studying his map, tracing routes with his finger. "We'll move at dusk," he said. "Travel through the night, rest during the day. That thing seems to hunt at night, so we'll have to risk it. But maybe in darkness, we can move more quietly, avoid detection." It was a desperate plan, but we had no better options. We spent the day in that cave, taking turns sleeping, eating what little rations we had left. My mind kept returning to the bodies we'd found earlier, the scouts who'd been torn apart. Had they seen the giant? Had they tried to fight? Or had it taken them by surprise, quick and brutal like it had taken our comrades? As darkness fell, we prepared to move. We checked our weapons, redistributed ammunition, made sure everyone had water. The sergeant gave us our marching order. Tight formation, weapons ready. Absolute silence. If we encountered that thing again, we'd empty our magazines into it and pray it was enough to bring it down. We emerged from the cave into full darkness. The jungle at night was a different world. Sounds that seemed normal during the day became sinister. Every rustle could be the giant. Every broken branch could be its footsteps. We moved slowly, carefully, testing each step before putting weight on it. We'd been traveling maybe 2 hours when we smelled it again. That rancid animal stench. Faint at first, then growing stronger. The sergeant raised his fist, the signal to stop. We froze, rifles coming up, fingers on triggers. The smell was coming from our left. Something was moving through the jungle parallel to our position. We could hear it now. The sound of heavy footsteps, vegetation being crushed. It was tracking us, following us through the darkness. "Do we engage?" the lieutenant whispered. The sergeant shook his head. "We run." On my mark, head for that ridge. He pointed to higher ground visible in the moonlight. 3, 2, 1, go. We ran. The jungle erupted behind us with a roar that shook leaves from the trees. It knew we were fleeing. It was giving chase. I could hear it crashing through the undergrowth, moving with terrifying speed. How could something so large move so fast? A soldier behind me screamed. I glanced back, saw him pulled off his feet by something I couldn't see in the darkness. His screams cut off abruptly. 7 left now. 7 out of 12 original men. We reached the ridge, scrambled up the rocky slope. The terrain was too steep, too broken for that thing to follow easily. We hoped. We prayed. We climbed until our hands bled, until our lungs burned, until we couldn't climb anymore. At the top, we collapsed, gasping for air. Below us, in the jungle, We could hear it moving, circling the ridge, searching for a way up. That horrible roar echoed through the night, a sound of frustration and hunger. "It can't reach us here," someone said. "It doesn't have to," the sergeant replied grimly. "It just has to wait. We have no food, limited water. It can wait us out." He was right. We'd traded immediate death for slow death by starvation. But at least we'd bought ourselves time. Time to think, time to plan. As the night wore on, the sounds below faded. The giant had moved off, either giving up or searching for easier prey. We didn't know which. Didn't matter. We used the opportunity to move again, following the ridgeline south, staying on high ground where we had visibility. By dawn, we'd covered maybe 10 kilometers. We were exhausted, running on fumes, but we were alive. The jungle below looked peaceful in the morning light. Beautiful, even. You'd never know that monsters lurked in those shadows. We found water around noon, a small stream cascading down the rocks. We filled our canteens, drank deeply. The water was cold and clear, the best thing I'd tasted in days. For a moment, I almost felt human again. "Look at this," the lieutenant said. He was examining markings on a nearby tree. Scratches in the bark, deep gouges that looked like they'd been made by claws. "There are more over here, and here. They're everywhere." The sergeant studied the marks. Territory markers. Like animals use, it's claiming this area as its hunting ground. "How intelligent is it?" someone asked. "It uses weapons, crude ones but weapons. It hunts tactically. It marks territory. That's more than just an animal." "I don't care what it is," the sergeant said. "I just want to get away from it." We moved on, following the ridge, always heading south toward the coast. The jungle thinned out as we descended, giving way to more open terrain. We could see further, move faster. For the first time since the attack, I allowed myself to hope we might actually survive this. That hope died when we heard the sounds ahead of us. Not the giant. Something else. Voices. American voices. We'd run straight into an enemy patrol. The sergeant motioned for us to take cover. We concealed ourselves in the undergrowth, barely breathing, as 6 American soldiers passed within 20 meters of our position. They were relaxed, talking casually, unaware of the Japanese troops hiding nearby, unaware of what else lurked in this jungle. We let them pass. We had no interest in engaging. Our ammunition was limited, and any gunfire would draw attention from both the Americans and possibly from that thing in the mountains. But as the American patrol moved off, I heard one of them say something that made my blood run cold. "Yeah, weird stuff happening out here. Johnson's squad went missing 2 days ago. Found their camp torn apart. Command thinks it was a Japanese raid, but I don't know. Didn't look like any combat I've ever seen." They were encountering it too. The Americans were losing men to the giant. Part of me wanted to warn them, to tell them what was really out there. But how could I? They were the enemy. And they'd never believe a Japanese soldier anyway. We waited until the patrol was long gone, then continued south. The terrain was getting more familiar now. We were approaching areas that had been mapped. Areas closer to the coast. Civilization, such as it was in this war zone. Around dusk, we heard it again, that roar. But it was distant now, far behind us in the mountains. The giant was calling out, maybe to others of its kind, maybe just declaring its territory. The sound sent chills down my spine. "We're almost clear," the sergeant said. "Another 10 kilometers, and we'll reach our outpost near the Lunga River. We can make it." We pushed on through the night, driven by the promise of safety. The jungle was thinning out, the trees less dense, the undergrowth easier to navigate. We were leaving the giant's territory, entering areas controlled by men again. Dawn of the 3rd day found us at the edge of a clearing. Across the open ground, maybe 200 meters away, we could see Japanese positions, fortifications, friendly troops, safety. We were about to move when the lieutenant grabbed my arm. Wait. Look. He pointed to the tree line on the far side of the clearing. Something was moving there. Something large. The giant had followed us, tracked us all the way here. It was watching the Japanese position, studying it with that terrible intelligence. Then it melted back into the jungle and was gone. It knows where our base is now, someone whispered. The sergeant's face was grim. Then we need to warn them. Prepare them. That thing is going to attack again. And next time, it won't be just one squad. It'll be the entire garrison. We ran across the clearing, shouting the password, identifying ourselves. The sentries nearly shot us, thinking we were enemies. But they recognized our uniforms, our equipment, and let us through. The commanding officer listened to our report with growing disbelief. A giant creature, 10 to 12 feet tall. Incredible strength. Uses weapons. Hunts men for food. I could see it in his eyes. He thought we were delusional, battle-fatigued, broken by combat. "Sir," the sergeant said, his voice steady, "we lost 8 men to this thing. The Americans are losing men too. It's real. And it's coming here." The officer dismissed us, told us to get medical attention, to rest. He didn't believe us. None of them did. That night, the giant attacked the garrison. The screaming started at 2 o'clock hours. I was in the medical tent, finally getting my wounds cleaned and bandaged, when I heard it. That sound. That horrible roar echoing through the night. Then rifle fire. Then men screaming in terror and pain. I grabbed my rifle and ran outside. The garrison was in chaos. Soldiers were firing into the darkness beyond the perimeter, muzzle flashes lighting up the night. Officers were shouting orders, trying to organize a defense. But I could hear it in their voices. The fear, the confusion. They didn't know what they were fighting. "It's here!" someone screamed. "The giant is here!" I ran toward the perimeter, toward the gunfire. The defensive line was collapsing, men falling back in panic. I could see it now, illuminated by searchlights that had been turned on. The giant, moving through our fortifications like they weren't even there. The wooden barriers we'd built shattered under its strength. Sandbag positions were torn apart with those massive hands. It was bigger than I remembered, maybe 13, 14 feet tall, covered in matted hair that might have been dark brown or black. In its hands, that stone club, now stained with blood. Fresh blood. A machine gun position opened up on it, tracer rounds stitching across its torso. I saw the impacts, saw the dark fluid spray from the wounds. But it didn't slow down. It just turned toward the machine gun nest and charged. The gunners never had a chance. The club came down once, twice, and the position was destroyed. Men and weapons crushed into the mud. The giant reached down, grabbed one of the bodies, and, God help me, it started feeding right there in the middle of our garrison. "Fall back to secondary positions," an officer screamed. We retreated, firing as we went. The giant followed, moving through our base like an avalanche. Tents were torn down, supply dumps destroyed. Everywhere it went, death followed. Men were crushed, torn apart, carried off screaming into the darkness. The sergeant found me in the chaos. "We need to get out of here. This position is lost." He was right. The garrison was being overrun not by American forces, by a single creature. One giant was destroying an entire military installation. It was impossible. It was happening anyway. We ran for the southern perimeter, gathering survivors as we went. Maybe 20 men total, all that remained of a garrison of over 100. Behind us, the sounds of massacre continued. The roaring, the screaming, the wet sounds of feeding. We didn't stop running until we were a kilometer away. Finally, we collapsed, gasping for breath. Behind us, fires burned in what had been our base. The giant's roar echoed through the night, a sound of triumph. "We have to warn regional command," the lieutenant said. His face was covered in blood, though I didn't think it was his own. "They need to know what's happening here." "They won't believe us," someone said bitterly. "You saw how the garrison commander reacted. They'll think we're cowards, deserters. They'll have us shot." The sergeant shook his head. Doesn't matter if they believe us or not. More men will die if we don't warn them. The Americans are pushing inland. They'll encounter these things too. Maybe they already have. He was right about that. I remembered the American patrol, the one that had lost an entire squad. They were facing the same nightmare we were. In a way, the Giants were the only impartial force in this war. They killed Japanese. They killed Americans. They didn't care about flags or empires. We were all just food to them. Dawn came slowly, revealing the full extent of the disaster. From our vantage point on a hill, we could see the garrison, or what was left of it. Buildings destroyed, fortifications torn apart, bodies everywhere. The Giant was gone, retreated back into the jungle, but the damage was complete. An entire military base wiped out in less than an hour. How are we going to explain this? Someone asked. We couldn't. There was no way to explain this that wouldn't sound insane. A giant monster attacked us. A creature from local legends came out of the jungle and destroyed a fortified position. Who would believe that? But we had to try. We spent the morning salvaging what we could from the ruins. Weapons, ammunition, rations, medical supplies, the bodies we left. There were too many, and we didn't have time for proper burial. The Americans would find them eventually. Let them wonder what happened here. We also found survivors. 3 men who'd hidden during the attack, too terrified to move. They told us what they'd seen. The Giant had been methodical, almost systematic. It had targeted defensive positions first, destroying machine gun nests and artillery. Then it had gone after the command structure, killing officers. Finally, it had hunted the regular soldiers, picking them off one by one. It's intelligent, the lieutenant said. It understands military tactics. It knows how to break a defensive line. That made it even more terrifying. This wasn't just a mindless beast. It was smart. It planned. It adapted. How do you fight something like that? We moved out around noon, heading southwest toward the main Japanese defensive line. We traveled in daylight, staying in open terrain where we could see threats coming. The jungle was the Giants' domain. In the open, we at least had a chance. We encountered an American patrol that afternoon. Both sides saw each other at the same time. For a long moment, we just stared at each other across maybe 50 meters of open ground. 7 Japanese soldiers, 8 American Marines. All of us exhausted. All of us scared. The American lieutenant raised his hand. Not in surrender, not in threat, just acknowledgement. Then he turned and led his men away. We did the same. Neither side wanted a fight. We had bigger problems than each other. That night, we made camp on a rocky hilltop with good visibility in all directions. No fire, no noise, just cold rations and nervous waiting. We could see the jungle below us, dark and impenetrable. Somewhere down there, the Giants lived. How many of them? We didn't know. We'd only seen one, but the locals spoke of them in plural. A population of creatures living in the deep interior, hunting anything that entered their territory. We should have listened to the islanders, one soldier said quietly. They tried to warn us. They knew. Would you have believed them? The sergeant asked. Before you saw it yourself, would you have believed in giants? The soldier had no answer. None of us would have believed. Not until we saw it with our own eyes. Around midnight, we heard sounds in the jungle below. That roar, long and echoing. But it wasn't alone this time. Another roar answered it. Then another. 3 distinct voices, maybe more. The Giants were calling to each other, communicating across the darkness. There's more than one, someone whispered, his voice shaking. We spent the rest of the night in terrified silence, listening to those sounds. The roaring, the crashing through vegetation. The Giants were active, hunting, patrolling their territory. We were just glad they weren't hunting us. Not yet, anyway. Dawn brought relief. The sounds faded with the darkness. The Giants, it seemed, were primarily nocturnal. That was useful information. Dangerous during the night. Less active during the day. We could work with that. We reached the main defensive line that afternoon. It was a large installation, hundreds of troops, well fortified and heavily armed. The perimeter guards challenged us, demanded identification. When we explained what had happened to our garrison, they didn't believe us. But then the commanding officer came out, a colonel, a man who'd fought in China and Manchuria. He looked at us, at our haunted faces, at the way we kept glancing toward the jungle. "Tell me everything," he said. So we did. The sergeant gave the report, detailed and professional. The lieutenant corroborated, adding his own observations. I and the other survivors filled in details, the bodies we'd found, the tracks, the attack on our camp, the destruction of the garrison, all of it. The colonel listened without interrupting. When we finished, he was quiet for a long moment. "I believe you," he finally said. We stared at him in shock. "The Americans have been reporting similar incidents," he continued. "Missing patrols, destroyed positions, bodies torn apart by something with incredible strength. They think we're using some new weapon. We thought they were using one. Turns out we're both wrong." He led us to his command tent, spread a map on the table. "Show me where you encountered these creatures." We marked the locations. Our first contact, the bodies we'd found, the garrison. The colonel studied the marks, his face grim. "They're concentrated here," he said, pointing to the mountainous interior. "The densest jungle, unexplored territory. That's their heartland. And we've been pushing deeper into it, both us and the Americans. We're invading their territory. What do we do?" the lieutenant asked. The colonel looked at the map for a long time. "We survive," he said finally. "We adapt. We learn their patterns, their territory, their hunting behavior. We avoid the deep jungle when possible. We fortify our positions. We travel in large groups. We never, ever go out at night." "And if that's not enough?" the sergeant asked. The colonel's expression was grim. "Then we pray. Because if there are as many of these things as the locals claim, and if they decide to really come after us..." He trailed off, but we all understood. If the giants truly wanted us dead, all of us, Japanese and American alike, we wouldn't stand a chance. That night, the colonel reinforced the perimeter. Double guards, searchlights, artillery positioned to fire into the jungle, heavy machine guns at every defensive point. He was taking the threat seriously. Finally, someone with authority believed us, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't enough, that we were just delaying the inevitable. The giants had been here for centuries, maybe millennia. They knew this island in ways we never could, and we had invaded their home. In the distance, I heard it again, that roar, and this time, I swear there were dozens of them, an entire population of giants, calling out in the darkness, reminding us that this was their island, their hunting ground. And we were the prey. The attack came 3 nights later. We'd prepared as best we could. The colonel had turned the installation into a fortress. Every approach was covered by overlapping fields of fire. Artillery was pre-sighted on likely attack routes. Searchlights swept the perimeter continuously. We had over 300 men, well armed and dug in deep. We thought we were ready. We were wrong. They came in the darkest hours before dawn, when exhaustion makes men careless, when attention wavers. The first warning was that smell, that horrible rancid stench rolling out of the jungle like a wave. Then silence, complete and absolute. Every animal in the jungle went quiet. The sergeant grabbed my arm. "They're here." "They?" I asked. "All of them." He was right. The giants emerged from the tree line like nightmares made flesh. Not 1, not 3, dozens of them, maybe 50, maybe more. They spread across our entire perimeter, a coordinated assault that showed terrifying intelligence. They weren't just animals. They were organized, tactical. "Open fire!" the colonel screamed. The night erupted with gunfire. Every weapon we had opened up at once. Rifles, machine guns, artillery firing over open sights. The sound was deafening, a continuous roar of firepower that should have shredded anything in its path. The giants charged through it like it was rain. I saw bullets hit, saw the impacts, saw dark blood spray from wounds. Some of the giants fell, too badly injured to continue. But for every one that fell, 2 more kept coming. They absorbed damage that would have killed 10 men and kept moving. Their primitive stone weapons raised high, bellowing those horrible roars. The first giant reached our line at the eastern perimeter. It smashed through the sandbag fortifications like they were made of paper. The machine gun nest disappeared under its club. Men scattered, firing wildly, but it was too close, too fast. It grabbed soldiers with those massive hands, tearing them apart with casual brutality. "Artillery! Bring the artillery around!" an officer screamed. But it was too late for coordination. The perimeter was collapsing. Giants were breaking through in multiple locations. Our defensive line, so carefully prepared, was being shattered. Men fell back in disorder, trying to form new positions, but the giants were among us now, in the camp, in our fortifications, everywhere. I found myself fighting alongside the sergeant and 2 other survivors from my original squad. We'd retreated to a supply depot. Using the buildings for cover, a giant appeared around the corner, 12 feet of muscle and rage. We all fired at once, emptying our magazines into it. It staggered, roared in pain, but kept coming. "Grenade!" the sergeant shouted. He pulled the pin and threw. The explosion was deafening in the confined space. The giant went down, finally. But its roar had drawn others. 2 more appeared, picking their way through the rubble. "Run!" I screamed. We ran. Again, always running from these things. Through the burning camp, past destroyed positions, over the bodies of our comrades. The giants were everywhere, methodically destroying our installation. This wasn't hunting. This was war. They were eliminating a threat to their territory. I saw an American. A single Marine separated from his unit, bleeding from a wound in his side. A giant was stalking toward him, club raised. Without thinking, I fired. My bullets hit the giant in the back. It turned, saw me, started toward me instead. The American used the distraction to escape. He looked at me as he ran past, just for a second. A look of understanding, of shared nightmare. Then he was gone, and I was running too, the giant's roar echoing behind me. The colonel was trying to organize a fighting retreat near the command post, maybe 50 men still combat effective, forming a defensive square. Artillery was firing continuously now, not at specific targets, but just into the mass of giants surrounding us. Some shells hit, some giants fell, but not enough, never enough. "We need to evacuate," the lieutenant shouted. "The position is lost." The colonel looked around at the burning ruins of his base. His face was gray with exhaustion and defeat. "Fall back to the coast," he ordered. "Every man for himself. Regroup at the beach." We broke and ran. The defensive square dissolved into individual soldiers fleeing for their lives. The giants pursued, but they were slowing down now. Exhausted from their assault, content to let us flee. They'd accomplished their objective. They'd driven us from their territory. I ran until my legs gave out, until my lungs burned, until I couldn't take another step. When I finally collapsed, I was on a beach. The ocean stretched before me, gray in the pre-dawn light. Behind me, in the jungle, I could hear the giants. They were at the edge of the trees, roaring their victory. But they didn't pursue onto the beach, the open ground, the coast. This wasn't their territory. They'd pushed us back to the edge of the island, and were satisfied with that. I found the sergeant on that beach, and the lieutenant, and maybe 20 other survivors. All that remained of 300 men. We'd been destroyed, completely and utterly destroyed. American soldiers were there too, maybe 30 of them, from various scattered units. They'd been driven to the coast as well. For a moment, both groups just stared at each other. Then, slowly, weapons were lowered. What was the point? We'd both lost. We'd both been defeated by the same enemy. An American officer approached the colonel. They spoke quietly for a moment. I couldn't hear what was said, but I saw them both nod, saw them shake hands, a temporary truce. Against the giants, we were all on the same side. We spent the day on that beach, tending wounds, sharing rations, trying to process what had happened. The Japanese wouldn't shoot the Americans. The Americans wouldn't shoot the Japanese. Not today. Not after what we'd both seen. As the sun set, boats arrived. Japanese naval vessels coming to evacuate survivors. American PT boats doing the same. We separated, moving toward our respective rescues. But before I boarded the boat, I looked back one more time. The jungle was dark and impenetrable. Somewhere in there, the giants lived. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands. They'd been there before the war. They'd be there after. And they'd made it very clear that the interior of Guadalcanal belonged to them. On the boat, heading away from that cursed island, I finally allowed myself to feel the full weight of what had happened. We'd lost so many. Good men, brothers in arms, all killed by creatures that weren't supposed to exist. The officer in charge of the evacuation interviewed us, asked what happened. We told him. Giants, man-eating creatures from local legends. They'd attacked our positions, destroyed our bases, killed our men. He didn't believe us. None of them did. The official report would say we were overrun by American forces, that we'd suffered heavy casualties in conventional combat, that we'd been forced to retreat. The truth would be classified, buried, dismissed as battle fatigue and jungle fever. But I know what I saw. We all do. The survivors, Japanese and American alike. We know the truth. The war continued on Guadalcanal for months after that. Both sides lost thousands more men, some to combat, some to disease, and some, though it would never be officially acknowledged, to the giants, the creatures that owned that island long before we arrived. Eventually, the Japanese withdrew completely from Guadalcanal. The Americans claimed victory. They built their airfields, established their bases, but they stayed on the coast. The interior remained unexplored, unoccupied. The Americans had learned the same lesson we had. Some territories aren't worth the cost of taking. I survived the war, made it back to Japan, got married, had children, built a normal life. But the nightmares never stopped. Even now, 70 years later, I wake up screaming. I see those giants. I hear those roars. I smell that horrible stench. Sometimes I wonder if they're still there. If the giants still live in the mountains of Guadalcanal, in the deep jungles that men fear to explore. The locals say they do, that they're still seen occasionally, that they still hunt anyone foolish enough to venture too far from the coast. I believe them, because I've seen the truth. I've looked into the eyes of something that shouldn't exist. I've fought monsters from legend. And I know that some places in this world still belong to creatures older than human civilization. Places where man is not the apex predator. Places where we are nothing more than food. Guadalcanal is one of those places. The Solomon Islanders were right all along. Their legends weren't superstition. They were warnings. Warnings that we ignored. And we paid the price in blood. I'm an old man now. I'll die soon. But before I do, I needed to tell this story, to write it down, so that someone knows the truth, so that the men who died on that island aren't forgotten, so that their deaths weren't meaningless. We weren't killed by Americans. We weren't killed by disease or starvation. We were killed by giants, by creatures that hunt in the darkness, by monsters from before recorded history. And if you ever find yourself on Guadalcanal, if you're ever tempted to venture into those jungles, into those mountains where the locals refuse to go, don't. Turn back. Stay on the coast, in the daylight, because if you go into the deep interior, if you enter their territory, you won't come back. I barely did, and I was lucky. The giants are still there, still hunting, still waiting for the next fool who doesn't believe in legends. Don't be that fool.